Do you like oxygen? Me too. By the time we're done here, we will examine what SNMP does, the 3 versions, and key concepts around it. When I first started my company, this is probably 10 years ago or so, I did so partnered with a guy who to this day is one of the most brilliant guys I know on the Linux side of the house. He can do anything with Linux, build software as a service, programming, that kind of thing. I bring a lot of the network engineering, and we sandwich together for a pretty amazing combo. And early on, he was setting up all his servers, and I go, well, what are you going to do for monitoring? And he's like, well, I've got it sending emails when something goes wrong. And I go, emails? And so I introduced him to the world of SNMP, and that's where I got the intro of this from. He goes, it's like I can breathe. But I will say, on the flip side, once you know what's possible with SNMP and you don't have it, it truly is like your oxygen has been cut off. You're like, ugh. Like at any moment, my whole life could change, and I never even know it. SNMP is a monitoring protocol. It was wrongly named, in my opinion. It should have been called the Simple Network Monitoring Protocol, but really it's called the Simple Network Management Protocol. It's one of the original protocols. Yellow is not a good color. It's one of the original protocols that was built with the TCP/IP protocol suite. There we go. And what it does is allow you to monitor things or actually pull data from devices on a specific interval. And when I say pull, I'm trying to say it enunciated. Pull, as in P-O-L-L, like go out and grab information from devices. So here's the big picture concept. Let me just I'll use a simple example, then I'll bring this into the equation. You've got network devices, routers, switches, wireless access points, all the different things that exist out in the world. And they're always doing things. They're always sending data, receiving data, passing traffic, blocking things with access lists. I mean, the NAT translations, they're doing things, right? This is what these devices do. Well, an SNMP server will pull them on an interval. So take your little clock, set your watch by it, by whatever interval you set. And a very common interval, for example, is once every 60 minutes. Now, hang on. I want to make sure I don't drop off a giant thing. SNMP is not just for network devices. There's SNMP for all kinds of things. You could have servers out here. You could what did I recently buy? It was like a thermostat or something for my house. A little thing that measures the temperature. So you can have all kinds of devices support SNMP that it will pull data from. Now, what kind of data? Well, that's where you introduce this. Let me give you an example one. Let's just say you have an internet connection right here. Here's the internet. Well, there's a certain amount of bandwidth being used on that connection at any given point in time, right? You're downloading data, uploading data to and from the internet. Well, you can have did I say 60 minutes? Oh my goodness, 60 seconds. I must have said, I don't know what I was saying. 60 seconds is a very common pull interval. Yeah, once an hour would be insane. So what you can do, what this server will do, is once every 60 seconds, for example, we'll go in and say, I want to find out what is the current upload and download rate. Now, the router always can tell you, well, here's what's actually happening right now. But heaven forbid it actually maintain a history of that, right? That would take a massive amount of disk space. Like if you were to once every 60 seconds, store, well, this is what it is, so I could generate a graph, right? A router's not meant to do that. It can tell you, here's what's happening right now, but a second later it forgets that. But that's what these SNMP servers do, is they go out there and they will pull that data, right? It's going all over the place, and it will plot this on a graph. Right? Here's your 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute for, let's just say, downloaded bytes, from the internet, right? And it converts it into megabytes or whatever metric you want to use, and puts all these little plots and then fills in the chart. And most of the time there will be an app on a phone or on a computer or an HTML web page that it generates where I can go through and validate all of those things. Really popular one back in the day actually was Mrtg. It was open source, free. It's still out there. There was a company out in Germany called PRT. Well, actually, sorry, they're they're called Passler. They created one called Prtg, which was a really easy to install Windows version of Mrtg originally, and they just have evolved. It's actually one of my favorite network monitoring, but there's SolarWinds, there's all kinds of different vendors that make these platforms, but I don't mean to, if any of these vendors are watching, I'm not trying to make it sound simple. It's complex, but simply put, it just gathers the data from the devices, plots the little dots on the graph, and then connects them for you, right? So what else about this? What is all of this? OID and MIB. So I gave you one example, like bandwidth, downloaded bytes of hundreds of thousands of examples I could have given of object identifiers. So downloaded bytes is an object, right? And when the SNMP was evolving, I mean, think about that. You've got, CPU utilization, memory utilization over time, bandwidth over time. How many bytes are, how many errors on the, you get the idea, right? That's where it's going, okay, this is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So they're like, I've got all these things that I can monitor. So let's create a dictionary for them, right? So we're going to create something known as an OID, which is an object identifier. It looks like an IP address, but it's much longer. You might have like 1.6.5.9.23.101. And it essentially, if you go into the dictionary, here's my little book for that device, it will have a catalog of all the OIDs, all the object identifiers, which is just all the things that you could monitor, whether it be, I think it just popped in my head when I did I actually did a YouTube video on SNMP a long time ago. It's got like 100,000 some views, uses the same slide. And I used an example of a coffee machine. Like if I were to create a coffee machine, I so cannot draw that's brewing coffee, and so I could set up OIDs for this device that would be things like how hot, what's the temperature of the coffee, what's the strength, right? Like what is it a strong, right? And I would put all of these things into all of these objects into this book, this dictionary for my device, and that book is called an MIB. A management information base. And doesn't that just sound like what it would be, right? Like it's a management information. It's a database of all the stuff that you can monitor on me. So you could actually go online, right? Go to Google right now, and you could type in MIB for Cisco routers. And Cisco, right on their website, you probably have to get a login or something, would be like, here, download our MIB, and that will have all the OIDs. Right? You following? All the objects that you can monitor on our Cisco routers. Okay, what about MIB for Cisco wireless access point? Go outside of the Cisco world. Everybody that makes something that you can monitor with SNMP creates an MIB for it, which contains all the OIDs. This can so make you sound smart. Just walk into a job interview and be like, well, I got my, you see what I mean, right? So where am I going with that? So these monitoring platforms like Prtg, like SolarWinds, like, there's a lot, and there's even a lot of open source ones, a lot of free ones that you can get. They come with the most common MIBs built into them. And they do things like Autodiscover, right? Where you could have it go out there and say, just point it to the IP address. And actually, I'm going to talk about the versions in just a second because this ties together. Point at the IP address of the device and say, discover it. And what it will do is it'll compare that device and look at, it'll pull, P-O-L-L, pull all of the OIDs that it can find on there and try and match it up to one of the MIBs that it's got. Let me clear this whole page off. It's a mess. And it will be able to discover what kind of device it is and create those sensors. That's where the work of creating a management platform comes in, is they put all those features in that allow you to do auto discovery or add your own MIBs. All kinds of fun stuff, right? So, versions of SNMP. SNMP has 3 different primary versions. We'll just say 1, I think it's 2C. Just think of it version 2, and version 3. Version 1 existed. That's like the 1970s version of SNMP that could go out there and do what I just said. But it was limited to, I think, really, really small bandwidth counter. Like you could only monitor, I think it's up to like 100 megabits per second before it's like, I can't monitor. Like old level of monitoring. 2C is the one that's really popular. And the reason is because it can monitor just about everything. They expanded the counters and things like that. The challenge with version 2C is it's got very limited authentication, meaning, I'll just put auth, meaning with SNMP version 2C, you essentially have a key. They call it a community string. I'll just put CS, community string. So when you go in, you can have SNMP read-only community string and read-write community string. And that's where your password. And by the way, the default on most devices is public and private. So if you just turn on SNMP on a lot of devices, it will use a default of public and a default of private. Now, read-write SNMP is scary. So here's the idea behind it is SNMP's monitoring, right? It's like I'm watching all this stuff. And people had the idea, it's a great idea. Great, don't get me wrong, great idea. Could be very useful and actually is in some cases. But you're monitoring, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, there's a thing. Bandwidth is too high or that went down or something. And people saw that and they're like, man, I wish my monitoring system could see that and react to it. Thus, read-write SNMP. Read-write allows the monitoring system to get in there and change settings on your device, but it's kind of like the keys to the car, right? You give that monitoring system keys to that car, or a community string, right? That's like private, and somebody, let's say evil person X gets that. They now have the control. I mean, for instance, your enable secret password, that's got an OID. So they could come in with read-write access and be like, yeah, let's just adjust that. And now they've got full access to your router. So got to be really careful with version 2C to lock it down with access control lists. So only that monitoring system is the one that can come in and actually read. Just think of this as read access, the read only your device, or make changes to your device. Now, SNMP version 3 was all about increasing the security. So what they do was they created SNMP views, groups, and users. And I'm just going to, again, this is just conceptual. Let me just give you the high level view. The view is exactly what it sounds like. Think of one of those view finders. You guys remember that? Maybe I'm too old. You're changing the little slide that tells you what you can see. And that's what the SNMP version 3 view does. It's instead of, like for instance, with SNMP version 2, when you had read-only, you got read-only to the whole thing. But, I mean, what if you don't want somebody to read the whole thing, right? So that's where the view could come in, and you could say, okay, you can just see this section of OIDs, right? Or you make your list and categories. You take those views, and you assign them to a group, right? So you get this view, this view, this view, and then we put those into a group, right? It's kind of like permissions, and says, okay, I've got that group of views now. Now let me create my user. And now instead of a community string, which SNMP version 2, you just had a string. Is kind of like a password, right? Now you've got the users, and you say, okay, the users over here, Bob, Jeremy, Jane, Sam, they all have permissions to that group, which gave them all the views, right? So SNMP version 3, and also added encryption to the whole thing too, right? SNMP version 1, version 2, all clear text. So you don't really want to do that over the internet. Version 3 adds at least some light level encryption to the whole story. So that's can I show it to you? Let me show you what SNMP looks like. So what you're seeing right now is the desktop view of our monitoring system that we use for my company, which is VIA. This looks like stadium seating, right? To where you choose your seats for the next performance. But that's actually a special view that Mrtg generated that tries to show all 5,000 some sensors. You can see in the upper right here, this is the number of sensors that we have going on. 5,000 of them are just fine. 59 of them are in a warning state. 68 of them are an acknowledged alarm, like something has gone wrong and we've said, yes, we're taking care of that. One of them is an unacknowledged alarm. And I know you're probably like, wait, shouldn't you stop the recording? Well, with the number of clients that we have, there's always something. You know, somebody's internet connection going down, somebody's disk space that is in a, below what we would say is an emergency threat, like, oh no, there's only 3% left. So there's always something that's going on. But I want to give you the feel for just what you can see. Now this is SNMP For example, you can see right here, I have a couple ESX servers. That's VMware that's being monitored. And you can see that inside of here are all the virtual machines that we're actually monitoring. Now, that is using some SNMP. And it's also using some, we'll call it ESX or VMware proprietary methods that PRTG has developed, that VMware has made available, all those kind of things. So when you're looking at things, like for instance, if I click on, let's just say this guy, which is an Exchange server, I can actually see for this virtual machine, inside of there, I've got this much CPU that's being used, this much memory that's being used, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's being done through a mix of SNMP, and you can see right here, VM Virtual Machine SOAP. They've got their own protocol that they're using to monitor that. And PRT. So I want to give you the feel that SNMP is one of the many, probably the primary method of monitoring that you'll use, but there's other methods that you can use as well, right? And if I look down a little bit more, like this is typical case SNMP right here. We've got a Sonic wall that's running at our data center. And I can see, okay, right now, inside of there, I've got, for example, the local area network physical connection has about 43 megabits per second of data going through it. And it's loading right now. Our server's a big bogged down, which is why it's just continuing to spin there. But I can drill in. I can see, show me that over a week. Show me that over the last 24 hours. Show me abnormalities inside of there. Like right now, you can see this one is being marked as unusual. Probably because it's so low. This is our SAN, our storage area network traffic. And I can see that's running at about 2 megabits per second, which is unusual. It's not an alarm, but man, that's weird because normally if you're talking about the SAN, you have a lot more traffic. Well, it happens to be Thanksgiving week. So do you see how there it is. Do you see how this can be so useful? Like, do you see what just happened right then? I was like, why is that? Like, within the matter of 10 seconds, I'm like, that isn't normal. Why do we have such low SAN traffic? And I'm like, oh, it's because it's the week of Thanksgiving. Of course, a lot of our clients are out of the office. They're not, so it is unusual that we would have that level of traffic, but it's those kind of things that you can see. So SNMP gives you the raw data. A monitoring system like this allows you to make assumptions, you know what I'm trying to say. There's a word there that we can use. Allows you to make decisions and direction moving things that you do based on the data that you're getting, right? I hope your takeaway from this was you know what SNMP is all about. You know the 3 versions of it. You know the key concepts like OIDs being objects, MIBs being the management information base that you can implement for each one of your devices, and how much literally, SNMP can change your life. How much like oxygen it is for your network environment. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.